What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here to talk about the safest and the most risky players in the NFL. Before we get started, this is something I want to do more of. I don't want to just do preview videos all the time. I want to get into some different topics, maybe strategy-based items, whatever. So if you have any ideas, tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. But for this video, we are going to talk about the differences between players in the NFL. Not all players are created equal. Some are higher floor, safer players. Some are higher ceiling, more risky players. The reason you care about this is because you should be rostering players according to the format of contest that you are playing. If you are playing a cash game against one other person, a double up where half the field gets all the same amount of money, you don't care in a double up if you come in first or 1,000th if 1,000 people get paid. So you're looking for high floor, safe players. If you're trying to win the Millionaire Maker, trying to win a GPP, you want to take on risk. With great risk comes great reward. You want guys who can go insane. So not all of them are created equal. So let's jump into this a little bit and we'll see what I'm talking about. So this is kind of behind the scenes a little bit. This has not been published yet, but this is something that's behind the scenes that I just whipped together in my database here. So what you're looking at, if you're watching the video, is a chart of quarterbacks. And I have them listed here with their average values for the past 4 seasons. So when I say value, I'm referring to how many times their salary they are returning. So you take their salary, you divide it by 1,000, you divide their fantasy points by that new number, and that's what I'm talking about. So if you are a $5,000 quarterback and you score 10 points, that is 2 times value. If you score 15 points, it's 3 times, 20 points, 4 times, etc. Okay? So that's what I'm doing here. The reason I decided to use value is because it tends to put these guys on somewhat of a level playing field, right? If I just went by straight fantasy points, guys like Aaron Rodgers or just the higher priced players would always kind of skew this. If we go by value, that's all kind of taken into account with their pricing as well. Okay, so let's just start and look at the highest average value quarterbacks. And believe it or not, Blake Bortles, over the course of the last 4 years, is averaging nearly 3.5 times value, okay? That is 918 total fantasy points over 48 games. He's averaging nearly 3.5 times value. This red line that you're looking at is their standard deviation. So we could argue whether this is a good way to determine volatility or not, but essentially standard deviation is a mathematical term, but for our purposes in fantasy, it's basically how close they stay to their average, right? If they explode often, if they have big games and have terrible games, their standard deviation is going to be higher. If they have very consistent games, all within a few points of their average, their standard deviation is going to be much lower. Okay, that's what you need to know. So, sorted by average value, you'll notice a few things right off the bat. So guys like Carson Wentz, who I know is not playing right now, has a 0.97 standard deviation. That is one of the lowest on this board, meaning he is one of the safer players on the board. He is much different than someone like Andy Dalton, for example. So they are basically within 2/100ths of an average value of each other, right? So Wentz's average value is 3.1, Andy Dalton's is 3.08, but they are completely different players. Andy Dalton's standard deviation is 1.15. It's about middle of the road volatility. Alex Smith, Russell Wilson, as you can tell, tend to be more of the higher volatile players. So step back from the math here for a second. The highest volatile player on this board is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Does that surprise anyone? The answer should be no, because Ryan Fitzpatrick, Fitzmagic, is the king of 6 touchdowns one week, 6 interceptions another. That is volatile. Okay, that is the perfect definition of it. So it is no surprise that he is the most volatile player or most volatile quarterback over the course of the last 4 years. Andrew Luck, one of the safer players on the board, nearly three times value at a 0.83 standard deviation. He is the safest guy that I have here. But if we sort this by, I want to sort this by, actually, this is actually total fantasy points. So Drew Brees' total fantasy points, nearly 1,000. What you'll notice is, first of all, Aaron Rodgers is insane. He has the third most total DraftKings points and 3.5 times value, which is like the highest value. So like even outpacing his own salary often. So pretty impressive stuff here. Okay, so what else do we see? Russell Wilson tends to skew more volatile. Matt Ryan, despite his low average value, is pretty safe. Okay, so only returning about 2.7 times his salary, but does it in a very safe manner. You'd feel comfortable rolling him out in formats where you're looking for safe players. So I hope that was a good example. We'll run through running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends here in a second, but I'm hoping that gave you a great baseline for what we're looking at here. Okay, here are the running backs, and I've expanded this out. I was only looking at the top 25 quarterbacks over the last 4 years. Now I'm looking at the top 50 running backs in the same time frame. So a couple of quick notes. Alvin Kamara and David Johnson are absolutely insane, averaging nearly 3.5 and 3.25 times value, respectively. And you'll see that Alvin Kamara, so this is what's interesting, is he scores a lot of fantasy points, but from a standard deviation standpoint, he's pretty safe. Like when he plays, he's going to score you. I shouldn't say he's going to score you. I should say he's going to provide a huge average, right? So this has kind of priced himself in as he was turning into the next big thing. You know, his salary was rising. He has continued to outpace it every single week. That's what this chart is showing you. If we're looking at more of the high-risk players, someone like, here's Devontae Freeman, who coincidentally, as I'm recording this, he's out for this week. But Freeman is someone whose standard deviation is nearly 2 on a 2.8 average value. That's a lot. Other guys over 2. Bilal Powell, you probably don't play him that often, so that's fine that he's that volatile. D'Angelo Williams, that doesn't count. That's kind of his older stuff. Let's see who else here is pretty volatile. Kareem Hunt is on this list, and actually we should probably sort this by total fantasy points so we don't get a whole bunch of scrubs. Here we go. So now here are the bigger names. So as far as the bigger names go, your more volatile guys are, let's see who we have here. I guess Carlos Hyde, he's not a huge name, but he racks up a ton of fantasy points. What's noteworthy is Le'Veon Bell and Zeke Elliott are not only some of the higher scoring players in the last 4 years, but they're also the safest. I mean, you could lock and load Zeke into any of these. I don't know if you can see this one all the way on the right-hand side. The only guy safer than Zeke and Le'Veon Bell, actually the safest of any of these 50 running backs, is Christian McCaffrey. And it's likely because he has a constant role in the offense. He has multiple outs, right? He can rush the ball, he can catch the ball, he has a solidified role. You're not wondering if he's going to play, all that good stuff. So that's what's going into these types of calculations from a football standpoint. Todd Gurley, pretty much middle of the road. I wonder if I just looked at his last 2 seasons, how he would look here. But this is a really interesting way to go through and identify players that you might want to roster in different formats. Let's move over to the wide receivers real quick. Here are the wide receivers, and what's noteworthy about the safer guys is DeAndre Hopkins is really the safest of the studs. You know, he scored the 3rd most fantasy points over the course of the last 4 years with a 1.1 deviation. That's really, really safe. You could plug him into cash games and feel fine. Jarvis Landry, what's that? The 2nd or 3rd lowest standard deviation. Demaryius Thomas, despite not scoring as many fantasy points or having as high of an average value, is a very consistent player. Julian Edelman, Des Bryant, guys that we don't need to worry about right now. So what you're noticing is it's all these guys who have solidified roles that don't really change. And then when you look at the spikes, so what I like about this visualization is when you're looking at the spikes, those are the spikes of guys, of players who, like, they pop off every now and then, right? These are great GPP plays. Doug Baldwin, injured right now, but you get the idea. Devontae Adams, huge standard deviation. Adam Thielen has a big standard deviation. Kenny Stills, like, these are the guys that you would expect to see. Cole Beasley is a perfect example because, like, I feel like when he scores a touchdown, he scores 3 of them. He pops up here too. Tyler Lockett, like, these are all. Robert Woods is another good one. These are all kind of like guys that, you know, they're going to go nuts one week and they're going to lay an egg the next week. Some of them tend to be big play guys with who benefit from the long ball, right? Deep threats in someone like a Robert Woods. So like, that's in your brain. This makes sense that these guys are riskier than others, but when you look at it on paper or on the screen, it kind of really hammers it home for me, and it points out different things. Like, I didn't realize how consistent DeAndre Hopkins was. You know, Jarvis Landry makes sense, right? But some of the stuff you don't really realize until you see it. And then let's finish up with tight ends here. And I'll change the color on this because you can't see it. Now for tight ends, there's a lot more volatility in the tight end position just in general. And that's what you're seeing here, right? So Gronk not only is, he scored the second most fantasy points. He is basically the safest guy. Yeah, he is. He is the safest guy on the slate, or of any tight end in the last 4 years, or at least he has the lowest standard deviation. Zach Ertz, much higher. And this might be a little bit impacted, especially by, like, you know, Nick Foles and Carson Wentz, you know, over the last half of the season. Obviously, Foles has played more, which might dictate some of these numbers. But Zach Ertz is a very high upside tight end, but can lay you an egg week by week. Risky guys. There's Ben Watson. Here's Jared Cook. No kidding. Jared Cook, one of the highest volatile, like a 2.4 standard deviation when your average is only a 2.7 is fairly insane. A huge chunk of that. So no kidding that he is volatile. Dennis Pitta, remember him? He was a pretty highly volatile player. Tyler Kroft, same thing. So even someone like an Eric Ebron, who's a very safe play as far as tight ends go, like, he's down there in 1.5 standard deviation. So this is really a little thing that I like to look at. And I don't think you need to look at this week by week because honestly, it doesn't change that much week to week. But to know who these types of players are is important. And then you can start targeting them in different formats that will only help you improve your standings and results. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm looking for suggestions for other videos. Tweet me. It's @DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Talk to you guys soon. Good luck.